Hello and welcome. This is Cheryl. Thank you so much for stopping by. I'm glad you're here. In this video, I'm going to share with you how to foil with your dies. Now, I just recently got a foiling machine, so I'm still fairly new to it, but I loved the fact that you could also use your existing dies to foil, so you didn't need to right off the bat get a whole lot of foiling plates. So I have my machine warming up right now, and while it's warming up, I'm cutting some foil to cover my plate and the cardstock. Now, the foil that I'm using, it's a little bit narrower than the height of the plate, so I'm actually only using the width of the plate. Because I'm still new to it, I wanted to try use as little or waste as little as possible while I'm still kind of getting the hang of it. So it's not going to cover the cardstock completely. In order to cover the cardstock completely, I could have trimmed it the other way and then trimmed the excess off the side, but I chose to do it this way for right now, just to possibly avoid waste if I'm making mistakes along the way. So I put my die on the foiling machine with the blade side up, put the foil with the pretty side down towards the die, and then put my cardstock on top as well as the plates, and then pressed the timer button. And I did this when the platform ready light was on, so that I knew that it was hot and ready to go. While I was waiting for the timer to go off, I got my machine out, and now I'm running it through my Big Shot machine. Now, before actually using this with hot foil plates, I made sure that the stacking was going to fit right for my machine while everything was still cold, rather than playing with hot items. Just easier to do it while everything is still cold. That way you can make sure that you've got the stacking right. So here is the very first attempt at foiling with my dies, and I really love how it looks. There's a tiny little bit of oil over foiling, but I have a sand eraser that I can help correct that when I get to making cards. And some of the overfoiling I'm actually not even bothering to correct because it's probably not noticeable to most people. So while I get my next die ready, I have my platform into the machine, waiting for the platform ready light to go off, and it has gone off. So I put my die once again, blade side up in the machine, put my foil pretty side down, and then my cardstock on top, and then the two plates that come with the machine. Now, one thing I was pleasantly surprised to find out while playing with this is that at one point things get knocked a little bit. So after heating up the foil on the Glimmer Machine, my plates get knocked, the paper gets knocked or whatever, and I was worried about how that would affect the foiling, and it actually didn't. It foiled just fine. So it's really nice to know when that happens that you could still get a really good foiling. Now, like I said, this machine is brand new. So when it plugs into the docking, it's really quite a snug plug-in. So for me, the hardest part is trying to pull it out of the machine without having everything shift. So once again, knowing that even if things shift, once you put it through the machine, it's the combination of the heat and the pressure that that makes the foiling work. So knowing that even if things move around while they're still hot, you can still get a good foiling. So this is the background that I got with that particular die. And then I wanted to play with just some individual dies. So I have these stacked hearts here. I'm going to lay them out just to kind of create a bit of a background for Valentine's Day on the machine. I don't tend to do a whole lot of Valentine stuff, but I thought this was a cute way to create a full background, just something to play with or whatnot. So I'm taking them. This particular set has, if you're not familiar with stacked tiles, 5 dies of each, 5 of each shape in this different sizes. So there's multiple of the same sized die. So if you wanted to cut, say, a bunch of the large hearts, you could use 5 of the 5 different dies and not necessarily need to cut through your machine as many times. So you'll see some repeat of the same sizes while I'm putting this on the foil plate or the Glimmer Machine. So once I've got everything set how I want to set it, I am going to put my foil on top as well as the paper. Once again, foil with the pretty side down towards the die. And then I'm going to put the paper on top, put the shims on, and then put my timer button on. So I'm showing these steps at the beginning, and then after a little bit, I tend to cut some of the steps out just so you're not seeing the exact same repeat over and over and over again. And this turned out to be a really, really cute background. I'm really happy with it. So I decided to do it again, but with a different color foil. So I've got my machine out there got it foiled, and that's how it looks with some gold cardstock. Love that. Now, when foiling first came out, I kind of thought it was a huge waste to foil and then have this piece of foil to not be able to use again. So I'm really, really happy that Pink Fresh came out with a solid hot foil plate. So once I'm done foiling some different dies, you'll see me use those backgrounds with the solid hot foil plate. And that way you get double use out of your foil and you have much less waste. And I'm absolutely love it. I was not going to do foiling or not going to get into having a foiling machine until I saw that that plate existed, and then it was a game changer for me and I was totally interested because there was much less waste. So next one here, I'm doing a butterfly die. I was trying to go for a background-ish look again, and to be honest, I didn't really like these ones foiled. Like the foiling is nice, but to use it as a background, it's kind of plain. So I'm putting those prints aside to possibly use at a later time, and maybe I'll just die cut those pieces of paper, I'm not sure. The next one I'm doing is a plaid background die. Once again, foil with the pretty side down towards the die, cardstock on top, and then the plates on top. And this I think would be really, really pretty for a background. I didn't actually create a card with this one for this video, but I'm going to save it for a future project and just have a little fun playing with it. Next one, I have this spider web die. I thought this would be really, really pretty with that same holographic foil that I used at the beginning with the snowflakes. So I've got my die down with the spider, foil pretty side down towards the die, paper on top, and then my plates. And once that is ready to go, I'll put that through my machine again. And that is how it turned out. Really, really pretty and really shimmery. And then the last one that I'm trying is one of these sentiment dies from Bold Text. Now, the piece of foil that I used was a little bit too small, so I knew right off the bat that I wasn't going to get the full text, so it wouldn't really be a usable foiling, but I just wanted to see how the text would look when it was foiled, if it would look all right, if it would be usable if I had a full piece of foil. And I was pleasantly surprised that it actually turned out really, really good. And you could have some fun with this. You could say ink in or color in the words and whatnot. But just good to know that you can do some of your text dies and they will work. So now I'm going to take that solid hot foil plate. I've already got it in my machine warming up, and I'm going to reuse some of these backgrounds here that I have. Once the platform is ready, I can put the foil down and put a piece of cardstock on top just to get all that foil off. Any of those extras that don't get foiled onto the paper, I snip them off and put them in my foil bin. I plan on getting one of the foiling plates that has the really, really tiny text, so reusing it with that. So this was a really, really pretty background. However, you kind of lose the snowflakes. Like if you look, you know that they're there, but it ends up being a little bit too busy to use as is. So I'll show you in a little bit what I do with it. And now I'm doing the next one. Once again, I left the solid hot foil plate on the machine between the foilings. There's no point in taking it off. So I put my foil pretty side down, cardstock on top, plates on top, and then put that through the machine. And there is the difference between the positive and the negative. And now we've got the heart background. Love how that looked. And that is the difference there between the positive and the negative. And love, 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 love. I can't say how much I love the fact that none of this extra foil is going to waste. Really neat seeing the difference between the positive and the negative between the different dies. And it's a great way to figure out what you like, what you don't like, what's going to work, what's not going to work. Sometimes even though you have a great concept in your head, sometimes you just don't know until you're trying it. So there's the positive and the negative of the plaid. And then the positive and the negative of the spider web. And once again, that spider web, you kind of lose it. You lose the detail of it because that holographic foil is just so busy. So now we are going to take some of these backgrounds and we're going to create some cards. Now I'm not using every single background that I made. Some of them I'll save for future projects. Some of them I was a little bit stumped on what I wanted to do with them, so I just tucked them to the side. So I have a sand eraser here. and it's good for taking any of the excess overfoiling off. Now, the one thing that you need to be careful of though is if you sand over some part that is foiled already, and it was really hard to not do that with this plaid background, it dulls the foil. So the foil isn't as shiny as it was ahead of time. So just something to be aware of and to be mindful of. If you are using the sand eraser, use it outside of your regular foiling and be very, very careful with it. For that one before, because I did dull some of the background, what I'll likely do when I do use it on a card is I will probably put some focal point or something on that part of the card and have something covering that. So now I'm going to use my Snowflake background and I'm going to create a card out of it. Now this negative background that I have, because it was so busy looking, I chose to use it as a mat for the image piece, the positive part of it. So I cut the first one down so that I was going to have an even mat around the front of a card, and then I'm cutting the second one down accordingly so that I can see the holographic one behind it. Now, to give that background, the holographic background, double duty, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take these snowflake dies that you see to the right, and I'm going to cut out of that holographic. Now, this is going behind that main image piece, so you're not going to see that this part was cut out. The one thing I did make sure to do is not to cut out within that mat that I want to see. And then I did tape those dies down so that they wouldn't shift. And I did notice once I pulled it through the machine that you do get a mark from that tape. So just be aware, if you're going to do this, put your tape where it's not within the part that you're going to see on the front of your card. And I did make sure when I was putting my dies down that my tape was not where I was going to see it, because I wasn't sure if it was going to make a mark or not. But just something good to be aware of ahead of time, that it does make a mark. So make sure it's somewhere where it's hidden. So now I'm going to put that main piece on, and then I'm going to take my glue and I'm going to glue all those snowflakes down as well. I do like to put them down ahead of time just to make sure that I like where I think I'm going to put them, and that way I can make any adjustments while they're there without any glue on it. I'm using some distressed collage medium. It dries completely clear and it dries matte, so if any glue happens to seep out, you're not going to see it. And I do like to put an acrylic block on top of dies or mats or whatnot when the glue is still wet. It just kind of holds it down in place, and that way I don't have to hold it while everything is drying. Freeze my hands up to do other things. So at this point, I thought I was going to leave the card like this, put a sentiment on it for later, but you'll see in a little bit that I end up putting a sentiment on it within this video. So now I'm going to take the holographic spiderweb one, and I'm just going to cut a spiderweb right out of it. I did try to match the lines. You could see the lines where I have the foiling from before. So I did try to match that, and it turned out really, really nice. I love this as a die cut spider web. I did cut an extra spider for the other card. That excess piece of background, I'm going to put it in my drawer with my specialty paper, and I'll use it for die cutting other things like little Christmas tree ornaments or just little tiny die cuts. So don't necessarily throw out some of your scraps. Some of it can still be used. I've got a white card base here, and I'm putting a black mat on it, and then I'm putting my positive foiling on one side, and I'm going to take one of those holographic spiders and add it to that particular card so that it has a little bit more of that holographic sparkle to it. I am not putting a sentiment on these cards. I'm just tucking them to the side. I'll put a sentiment on them when I decide what I want to use them for. They may be just Happy Halloween cards, or they could be a birthday card or something for someone that just loves spiders and spider webs. So the next one here, I put the holographic die cut, and then I'm going to glue the spider down on it. And I typically will put it on hanging from the horizontal line, but this time I put it a little bit down below just because I thought it was fun. While things are on that spider web card were drying, I had put a sentiment on here. Now I reused some of that holographic background that was cut off the side when I was cutting it down to size. So once again, those pieces are being reused and not going to waste. These are the spider web cards that are done, ready for sentiments when I find out what I'm going to use with them. So for this one here, I did the same thing as that the snowflake one, and I cut the negative part down to size so that I was going to have an even area around the front of my card base, and then I cut the positive one a little bit smaller. So I'm going to use this background as a mat, but I'm also, as you can just see, I just cut those flowers out of it. So I am going to put those flowers on the image part of the card, and I'm going to match up where the stems are at the bottom. So when I was placing my dies to die cut them, I was paying attention to what it would look like as a layout, as well as knowing that I was going to match where the stems went there. Now that little piece there didn't actually get glued down. I didn't have enough glue on it, so I'm just adding a little bit more glue so that I can attach it to the back of the card. Now when you're doing this, you want to make sure that that whole bottom line lines up. So I have it lined up with the lines on my mat that I'm working on here, and I'm just making sure that it is all even and lined up before I put an acrylic block on there to let it dry. Once those two pieces are dry together, I can glue them to the front of my card. And for this whole thing, I'm using the Distress Collage medium to glue everything. And I'm making sure as I'm putting it down that I've got a nice even mat all the way around the outside of my card. So now I'm going to glue down the flower die cuts. And like I said before, I am paying attention to where those notches are out of the bottom mat, and I'm matching them and lining them up so that that bottom of that stem is exactly where it was cut out of the bottom of the cardstock. Now I could have done a partial die cut and had that bottom part completely even and not cut out, but I just thought this might be kind of a different, interesting look. So once I have both of those flowers down, I'm going to just let that dry with an acrylic block on top, and then I'm taking the excess of the background and I'm putting a sentiment on there. You see the tin that I had there. I have a bunch of different sentiments from a text stamp that I have. I'll just stamp and emboss the entire thing and then just cut the whole thing up so that I end up with a whole bunch of sentiments that are quick and easy to grab anytime I want. It comes in really, really handy, and it makes it easy to not have to pull out a stamp and do the stamping and embossing and whatnot all at once while I'm trying to make a card. It's great to have a bunch of these already pre-cut, pre-ready to go, that I can just run through and grab. So I put that sentiment onto the background there, and then I'm just I took some of the background or of the excess cardstock strips that I took off, and I glued them to the back just to add a little bit of dimension without using foam pop dots. Just another way to reuse some of your excess scraps. I don't do this often. I'll typically use foam pop dots because I just find them a little bit convenient. But if you want something that's not quite as dimensional, this is a good alternative. So once everything's glued together, this is how the card ended up looking. And I thought it was really, really cute. So I'm going to do a similar thing with this Valentine's one. I've already got it cut down, but I'm going to take some of the heart dies and I'm going to cut some of that mat out before assembling the card. This is just a great way to give your cardstock double duty, as well as the fact that if you have a specialty cardstock that you're running low on, or just don't have very much left of, or just really want to use the most of it. I do this quite often, and no one can ever tell until I tell them what I do. So I'm trying to cut 3 different hearts out, and I'm trying to do it in places that I know won't be visible on the outside mat. That one that I'm taping down right now is getting a little bit close, but I know that it will be covered. So there's the background. This one here, you could really see the marks that tape made in there. So just something to be aware of if you do use tape with your foil. This is Crafter's Companion die tape that I have. I have another one on order, but it's just not here yet. But just be careful if you're using tape on top of the foil, that you put it in an area that you're not going to see it. So I'm taking that background there and I'm taping or gluing it down to my card, and then I will glue the image piece on the mat. And then I'm going to stack up those card die or those heart dies that I just made and glue them together before putting them on the card. Now I did them kind of wonky on purpose. I didn't want them perfectly stacked, but if you prefer perfectly stacked, you can absolutely do that. I just thought with the background, this might look kind of pretty. So I'm going to also add a sentiment in the same way, using some of that excess background. It's just a great way to use that up, have it not go to waste. Like I said, from one of the backgrounds before, you could also use it to just die cut little tiny images or whatnot out. Now you are going to have the lines from the heart in there, so for some things that might be an issue. For other things, it might not be. It might just be a little design feature. So I've got my sentiment here. I did the same thing as before, added a few little strips of the excess cardstock that got snipped off, just because I wanted to have this partially on the hearts and partially not. So it was going to be really weird stacking with a foam pop dot. So easiest way to do it was just little strips of cardstock on the back. And once again, another great way to use up some of your excess cardstock strips that get cut off and stack them up. It does make it a little bit more sturdy than just 3D foam pop dots. And it's just a nice alternative of a different way to stack things up on your cards. Once again, using the Distress Collage medium to glue it all together. And then I also put the acrylic block on top just to hold it in place while it was drying. But by using that foil background in 3 different ways here, as a matte, as the hearts, and the matte for the sentiment, it's just a great way to use it the most. So for the other heart background that I have here, I decided to do an inked background over top. And the great thing with ink with the foil is the foil resists the ink. So you still see the color of the foil through it. And this particular one, it's gold foil that is on the background there. So it's nice to still be able to see that gold foil there. I've got 4 different distress ink pad colors that I'm using. I'll have every single thing that I'm using listed and linked in the description below. So if you're curious about something, I'll post it there. But I'm just going through with the colors from light to dark, and then I will go back again from dark to light. Now, what I didn't realize at this step here is I accidentally touched the ink pad with my fingers and got some red ink. So I am actually transferring some red ink into that light pink area at the top, which is not exciting to find out. So what I'm going to do is I'm still going to go from dark to light, seeing if that hides some of that red there. And that's where I realized what I was doing. And I'm also going to take a paper towel and hold the piece down with the paper towel just to not transfer any more ink there. Now you'll see as I'm going from dark to light again, it really deepens and intensifies the colors from the different layers, but it doesn't actually hide the red as much as I wish it would. So now I'm going with the second lightest color here, and it once again, it's darkening it quite a bit, but it isn't quite covering the red as much as I would like. And to be honest, I didn't really think it would. I just thought maybe the ink was going to be fresh enough that it might, but sometimes you can't hide dark marks on light colors. So I'll show you in a minute how I fix it. I actually didn't think I was going to be able to fix it, but I was able to, and I was pleasantly surprised. So at this point, I'm not going to assemble the card because it's not how I want it, but I was just going to show you what I was going to do. I have some gold mirror stock here that I'm putting behind it to bring out the gold hearts on there. And I was going to cut some gold foil hearts as well as put that sentiment there that I had to the side. So at this point I figured, you know what, there's nothing lost by trying to fix it. So I took my mister bottle with water and I just decided to try spraying it. This particular cardstock that I'm using is Hammermill because I heard it was great to use with foil. And to be honest, I didn't think it was going to like the water, but it didn't react as badly as I thought it was going to. You see the colors drastically lighten as I spray it. So I sprayed it with a second coat just because there was some spots that were missing from the first coat, and then I let it dry completely. And so it did fade all of those colors, but it also faded those red marks. So once that is completely dry, I go back and I re-ink the whole thing in the exact same way that I inked it the first time. And it actually hides the red spots quite well. So there you can see that those red spots are there, but once I go back in with my colors and re-ink it, they're going to be hidden more. So I'm speeding this up while I repeat this process just because it's exactly the same as before. So I've got my 4 colors here. I'm going from light to dark, and then I'm going back again from dark to light. This time I'm making very certain when I'm using the red and afterwards that I am using a paper towel to hold it down so that I don't get the red all over my fingers again and repeat this whole process. But by going back over this once again, most of that red, those red spots have faded enough and have hidden enough that I can assemble the card. And while knowing that they're there, I can still see them. They're not nearly as noticeable, so I don't find that it's really ruined the background. So I was pleasantly surprised to find that I could fix that background in that way. And I wanted to keep that in there just so that if that ever happens to you, once again, there's no harm in trying to fix it and seeing if there is a way that you can adapt to fix it. Now, if it was only in one spot, I probably would have chosen to put a die cut there or just change the original design that I had planned for this card. But because it was in several spots and it wasn't in enough, the spots were places that I couldn't make a design that would make any sense. So like I said, there was no harm in trying and fixing it. So I'm going to take this extra piece of gold foil that I have and I'm going to cut a couple hearts. Now I could have cut them out of the background like I've been doing through this whole video. I just chose not to because I had this extra little piece. Gold is not necessarily my favorite color, so I tend not to use it a ton. Sometimes it's necessary, but it's not my, I tend to be drawn a little bit more to silver than I am to gold, so that's the color I tend to use if possible. Like I said, sometimes you have to do gold because it just makes sense with what you're doing. So I didn't find that I needed to save this extra little piece here. I could just cut it up. So now I've got those two hearts in there, and then I'm putting the sentiment. Typically I'll put my die cuts and then put the sentiment to the right. This time I chose to put it to the left just for something a little bit different from what I normally do. So I am putting some foam pop dots on the back of this particular one to add it to the card. They're nice and quick and convenient and easy, and I actually have a ton of them, so it's always nice to use some of them up. Now, while I was putting that sentiment there, I noticed my hearts, because the glue was still not dry, it was popped up, so I put an acrylic block on there to dry. And here are all the cards that I made in this video. So first are those spider web ones that are going to have sentiments at some point, my little flower one, the first heart one with the pink foil, and then the snowflake one. I have to say this one might be my favorite. And then that little hearts one that we just finished. Overall, I absolutely loved foiling with the dies, and it gives them so much more potential. Thank you so much for joining me.